We're going to talk about socialism, communism, isms. There isn't, but it depends on who you talk to and whether communism and socialism are really different. There's different variations of socialism, and there's all this stuff. I'm not a communist, socialist, Marxist. I'm going to try to be fair because that's my job, but we're going to wing it. The rise of socialism actually starts with people that we, in the modern world, call utopian socialists, even though they weren't really utopian. We get that word because Thomas More wrote this book called Utopia about this perfect world that would come to be out into the future. These folks believed that there was a way that everybody could just work together, right? We know from economics that working together is better than working apart. There's a reason why we don't let you talk during exams, and there's a reason why we don't let businesses sit in a room together and talk about what prices should be. Cooperation actually is a very powerful thing. And so the utopian socialists believe that using, scientific principles and using things that are true in the modern world, we could work together and create a society that's good for everybody, that makes everybody better off, and it's peaceful and it's utopian. So we get people in this group, for example, Robert Owen actually was a rich industrialist, and he created sort of towns where everybody was, equal kind of, and he experimented in socialist communities around factories. He was very big on education and against child labor, and there's elements of things that these folks propose that are still around in our world. So, and if you read about these people, they were pretty strange people as people go, but anyway, utopian socialists. Back again, we have these three questions: what to produce, how to produce, who benefits from that production. In a capitalist world, it's the free market that does it. It's the buyers and sellers. It's this process. In socialism, the idea is that the government is going to answer those questions using scientific principles of some kind. They're not going to do what's best for them. They're going to do what's best for everybody. Karl Marx, he wrote the Communist Manifesto. That's communism, but many people refer to his theory as scientific socialism. And again, don't get caught up in the phraseology. This is mid-1800s, 1840s through the 1860s. Communist Manifesto, Das Kapital, profound effect on the world. Most of his theory is a classical economic theory. It's similar in its fundamentals to Adam Smith and Adam Smith's followers. He is going to take that theory and suggest that it leads to other conclusions. First thing that you have to understand about Marx is that Marx believes that this is a history, that there's a history of class struggles in society, that what's going on is a natural consequence of all of these class struggles that have gone on over time, and that the current class struggle is between the owners of capital, the Tony Starks and Henry Fords, and the workers who work for them. But there's always this conflict between something. That we had feudalism before, and there was a conflict between the peasants and the nobility. There's always conflict, class struggle. Society gets divided up into groups, into classes. Marx believes, as did Adam Smith and his whole group, that labor is the creator of value, that capital is sort of stored up labor, that what capitalists do is they bring together this business. The labor creates the value, but the capitalists skim off the top, which means labor is being exploited. Labor is not being compensated its true worth in the process. So it's not that he doesn't think that capitalism did good things. He says the following: it has accomplished wonders far surpassing Egyptian pyramids, Roman aqueducts, and Gothic cathedrals. It has conducted expeditions that put in the shade all former exoduses of nations and crusades. In other words, the capitalists have done remarkable things. And he's not saying that that's not true. What he's saying is that the system did that on the back of the workers. So here we go. If you haven't seen Modern Times Charlie Chaplin movie, there's a little pic from it right there. You should go see that. Owing to the extensive use of machinery and to the division of labor, the work of the proletarians has lost all individual character and consequently all charm for the workman. He becomes an appendage of the machine, and it is only the most simple, most monotonous, and most easily required knack that is required of him. So workers, instead of doing something that requires skill and which they can enjoy and love and take pride in, they're an appendage of the machine. As they produce more and more and more, their wages are going to go down, down, down. They're going to be worse and worse and worse off. Workers are being eaten up essentially by capitalism. And then, no sooner is the exploitation of the labor by the manufacturer so far at the end that he receives his wages in cash that he is set upon by the other portions of the bourgeoisie, the landlord, the shopkeeper, and the pawnbroker. So bourgeoisie is the capitalist, proletarian is the worker. Don't worry about that. All through society there are classes, and the workers are at the bottom of the rung. They're the lowest class, and they're being set upon by everybody who's above them and being taken advantage of. Part of the problem here now is that capitalism is going to keep expanding production, but the workers who buy this stuff aren't expanding, and their income isn't expanding, their wealth isn't expanding. They can't buy all this stuff. So capitalists have to become what a Marxist would say is an imperialist. We would say a globalist. So Marx predicts that capitalism and globalism and the need of a constantly expanding markets for its products chases the bourgeoisie across the entire surface of the globe. We get globalization. It must nestle everywhere, settle everywhere, establish connections everywhere. And then the big finish. This is the last paragraph of the Communist Manifesto. The communists disdain to conceal their views and aims. They openly declare that their ends can be attained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. Let the ruling classes tremble at a communistic revolution. The proletarians have nothing to lose but their chains. They have a world to win. Working men of all countries, unite. So, if you ask someone a Marxist phrase, a lot of people say, workers of the world unite, they have nothing to lose but your chains, but Marx had never actually said it that way. He said it this way. Unlike the Utopian socialists, the scientific socialists, the Marxists, the communists, they believe that there has to be forcible overthrow, that the workers have to forcibly take society from the bourgeoisie, from the capitalists. Okay, so not as pretty a picture as the Utopian socialists were going to draw. It's life. So, where does the first revolution take place? Now remember that Marx says that communism is the end result of class struggle that's lasted over time. And so there's a struggle between the rising capitalists and the feudal lords. There's feudalism. And there's a conflict in feudalism, and the result is that we move from feudalism to capitalism. And then that capitalism is internally flawed, and those internal flaws in capitalism again create this class structure and this class conflict, which ends up in the workers revolting and taking over and forming communism. Russia was not where Marx said the revolution would start. Marx was very clear that the revolution would come in Germany. Russia was feudal. Russia had the Tsar. Russia did not have a modern capitalist economy. So lots of people argued, but back at the time that Russia became the Soviet Union and the revolution happened, which is 1915, there was huge arguments about whether it could actually be a Marxist revolution, because Russia had not gone from feudalism to capitalism to communism. So that all aside, Vladimir Lenin, that's not his real name, takes over Russia. When he dies, Joseph Stalin, that's not his real name. Stalin is Russian for steel, so he changed his name to Joe Steel. They take over Russia. Basically, the people who argue that it couldn't possibly be a real Marxist revolution all get killed, not accidentally. It's not a place you would have wanted to live. If you've never read Animal Farm, and I know I keep referring to things you should read and see and do, but you should read and see and do. If you've never read Animal Farm by George Orwell, the same guy who wrote 1984, which you should also read if you haven't read Animal Farm, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. It is a parody. It is a scathing review of communism as it existed in the Soviet Union. Okay? So we need to talk about this. Life in Russia. There's something else you should see. There's a old bad Robin Williams movie called Moscow on the Hudson, where he's a Russian musician, a Soviet musician, and he defects to the United States. It's not a very good movie. You should only watch about the first half hour of it. But in that half hour, for example, he's walking down the street and he notices that there's a big line, and he gets in the line. And nobody really knows what the line's for, but it's a line, and you see a line, you get in it. And it turns out it was a toilet paper line, and he brings his family a bunch of toilet paper, and they're all really happy. We're going to see, and we've already talked about decentralization of decision making. In Russia, they had to make all the decisions at the top. They had a system where they had a government bureaucracy called Gosplan, and Gosplan made decisions for the entire country, and it didn't work very well. Definitely rough seas ahead.